The latest season of Doctor Who has given us plenty of mysteries to speculate on. The Legend of Ruby Sunday answered some of these questions with the reveal of Sutekh as the big bad for the series finale, but the red herring of Susan Triad has left me wondering if one of the show's oldest mysteries will be explored. What happened to the Doctor's family? They're rarely ever mentioned, with this scene in The Devil's Court being the first time Susan is referred to by name in the revived series.
I live there with my granddaughter Susan.
Your what?
My granddaughter.
Susan.
Susan Foreman holds such a place in the hearts of the fans that Sutekh used her name as part of a trap for the Doctor. Susan Triad turned out not to be our Susan, but with all these recent mentions of her, I don't think the show is done with this mystery just yet. So, in a brief interlude from my recent retrospective video, let's take a look back at everything we know about our hero's family. Who were they? What happened to them? And most intriguingly, why doesn't he ever talk about them? Firstly, we know the Doctor had parents. I know that sounds like a given, but certain transmedia stories have slightly complicated the issue of the Doctor's parentage. At the very least, the Doctor remembers having parents. In the TV movie, the 8th Doctor recalls a Gallifreyan father and, controversially, a human mother.
I'm with my father, we're lying back in the grass. It's a warm Gallifreyan night.
Gallifreyan?
Gallifrey! I'm half human. On my mother's side.
Although the 15th Doctor slightly dodges the question, he has previously confirmed that he was once a father, with one of these children presumably being Susan's mother or father.
Easy for you to say, you don't have kids.
I was a dad once. Donna, I've been a father before.
What?
Lost all that a long time ago.
Dad to dad. Dust to dust. Am I right?
The Doctor was not an only child, however, with Smith and Jones revealing he had a brother.
Have you got a brother?
No, not anymore. Just me.
And Arachnids in the UK confirming they had sisters.
I used to have sisters. I used to be a sister.
Beyond their immediate family, the 13th Doctor claimed to have 7 grandmothers, with Granny 5 being her favourite.
A bedtime story my gran used to tell me.
You had a grandmother?
I had 7, but Granny 5, my favourite, used to tell me about the Solar Tract.
I've seen it suggested that these might not literally be 7 different grandmothers, but 7 incarnations of the same Time Lord, which is a fun idea. Imagine if your relatives could change their faces. You'd probably give them numbered nicknames too. Wider family largely exists in throwaway lines, with the Doctor mentioning an uncle.
It is a fundamental postulate that all motion is relative.
You wouldn't say that if you met my uncle.
And a 2-headed godmother.
I thought you were just an embarrassing present from a dull godmother with 2 heads and bad breath. Twice.
But now let's get into the big ones, starting with the titular unearthly child of the show's first episode, Susan Foreman, the Doctor's granddaughter. She was his first companion, even being there when he originally stole the TARDIS and joined him in his exile from Gallifrey. Susan shared her grandfather's fascination with science and history and often seemed a little in over her head, but she was a good surrogate for the young viewers watching the show for the first time. She travelled with the Doctor and her teachers Ian and Barbara until the Season 2 story, The Dalek Invasion of Earth. While freeing a future London from the reign of the Daleks, Susan began to fall for a young man named David Campbell. Seeing this, and recognising that Susan was growing up, the Doctor decided she needed to forge her own path, and so left her with David but promised he'd return one day. Decades later, in 2008's The Doctor's Daughter, the 10th Doctor suddenly found himself with a daughter. No way. Christened Jenny by Donna Noble, she was created via a progenitor device using a tissue sample to fight in the ill-fated war of Messaline. While having the instincts of a soldier and developing a difficult relationship with her father, the two soon connected over their thirst for adventure. Sadly, Jenny was killed in combat, with her death marking the end of the war on Messaline. This turned out to be no problem, barely an inconvenience, since she was quickly revived after the Doctor left. This wasn't given a full explanation on screen, but the reference book The Time Traveller's Almanac claimed that she was revived by the gaseous compound of the Source, a terraforming device with regenerative properties. Jenny followed in her father's footsteps, stealing a spaceship and flying out into the stars. Recently, in the 2020 series finale, The Timeless Children, a forgotten chapter of the Doctor's life was revealed as they discovered their origins as a foundling from an unknown realm and species. They were discovered and taken in by the Shabogan explorer Tecteun, who conducted various experiments on the child to unlock the key to regeneration. This soon led to the formation of Time Lord Society, with the child eventually being genetically reset, most likely via a chameleon arch, into the First Doctor. The 13th Doctor eventually reunited with her adopted mother, but she revealed herself to be cold and vengeful, viewing her child as nothing more than a failed experiment. Tek Taeun and her mysterious organization Division created the Flux to destroy the Doctor and their universe, but she was killed by Swarm before she could complete her plan. Despite all the cries that this storyline destroyed canon, all the Timeless Child changes about our findings so far is it retcons the parents from the TV movie to be adopted parents. And given how unique this child was, it's debatable if they even had biological parents. This is also consistent with episodes like Listen and Hellbent, which imply the Doctor lived in some kind of orphanage before they joined the Time Lord Academy. It's not a perfect fit, but it's just about compatible with the history we know. Now, the Doctor's love life could easily take up a full video on its own, but let's quickly go through his many marriages. When posing as the Doctor in Death in Heaven, Clara Oswald claimed that he'd been married 4 times.
I've been married 4 times or deceased.
Since 3 of these marriages are documented on screen, the Doctor's first wife, or Mrs. Who as she was dubbed by Stephen Moffat, is presumably a Time Lord and Susan's grandmother. His next 2 marriages were partially accidental. In The End of Time, it's casually mentioned that the 10th Doctor married Queen Elizabeth I, leading to one of the dirtiest jokes in RTD1.
Well, let me tell you, her nickname is no longer... Anyway.
The Day of the Doctor eventually depicted this wedding, revealing he proposed in an attempt to out her as a Zygon duplicate. This backfired when it was revealed the Zygon was disguised as a horse, meaning he was now officially engaged to the Queen of England. The two were married in 1562 and he promised to return as he ran back to the TARDIS. Given this was her reaction when she saw him again years later,
Off with his head! What?
he probably didn't keep that promise. Interestingly, the 2018 novelisation of The Day of the Doctor has a character question the wedding's legitimacy, and even speculates that Elizabeth simply faked the ceremony to tether the Doctor to her services, since she was skilled in manipulating egos, suggesting this was a purely strategic move on her part. Either way, the Doctor and the future royal family certainly believe it happened.
And so much for the Virgin Queen, you bad, bad boy.
In the 2010 Christmas special A Christmas Carol, the 11th Doctor somehow accidentally got engaged to Hollywood starlet Marilyn Monroe. Despite his attempts to escape, she'd already booked a cab to the chapel. He seemingly went through with the marriage, but questions its legitimacy.
And that was never a real chapel.
The Husbands of River Song implies that a similar incident occurred with Cleopatra.
Marilyn Monroe.
Stephen Fry.
Cleopatra.
Same thing.
Speaking of which, let's finally talk about the Doctor's most famous wife. Professor River Song was a fellow time-travelling adventurer from the 51st century and daughter to companions Amy Pond and Rory Williams. The Doctor and River led a complicated non-linear relationship, eventually resulting in their marriage to restore a broken timeline in 2011. Since the ceremony took place in an aborted reality, some question its validity, but they refer to each other as husband and wife and share a deep romantic bond, with the 12th Doctor's distinctive ring being identified as their wedding ring by the novelisation of Twice Upon a Time. Through his marriage to the Virgin Queen, we have King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn as the Doctor's mother and father-in-law, technically making the Time Lord part of the House of Tudor. They're joined by Gladys Pearl Monroe if we assume that was a real chapel, and because of the timey-wiminess of the Matt Smith era, Amy and Rory became the in-laws to Amy's childhood imaginary friend, making these moments a little uncomfortable. An honourable mention should probably go to Lee Clayton, a member of Division who acted as a husband to Ruth Clayton, the human disguise of the fugitive Doctor. Although many describe him as an incarnation of the Doctor, since he seems to be an entirely separate being without the ability to regenerate, I think it's more accurate to view the Metacrisis Doctor as a brother or relative to the Doctor, similar to how Ben Reilly is sometimes considered Peter Parker's brother in the Spider-Man comics. It's a long, nonsensical story, but the short version, the 10th Doctor's hand was cut off during a duel with the Sycorax, although he was able to grow it back with residual regenerative energy. This severed hand fell to Earth where it became the property of Jack Harkness, who eventually returned it to the TARDIS where it remained as a sort of macabre souvenir. During the Series 4 finale Journey's End, the Doctor avoids a full regeneration by healing his body and siphoning the remaining energy into his spare hand. When Donna Noble came into contact with the hand, the regenerative energy triggered a biological metacrisis, causing the hand to grow into a part-human clone of the Doctor who occasionally talks like Catherine Tate.
Oi, watch it, spaceman.
Oi, watch it, Earth Girl.
The novel Who-Ology considers this clone to be a brother of sorts to the Doctor, Doctor, and it's a nice way of looking at it. This brother is left with Rose Tyler in a parallel world, becoming an honorary member of the Tyler family. And since the universe seems to really want the Doctor to look like David Tennant, the 14th Doctor was left alive and well with the Nobles after his bi-generation, becoming part of the family and a surrogate uncle to Rose. And that's pretty much everything we know from the TV series. As you can probably tell, before the revival we knew practically nothing about the Doctor's family. Who were their parents? Who were their children? And just what happened to them all? Before answering that last question, let's take a look at how Transmedia has elaborated on this mystery. While William Hartnell's Doctor was entertaining the nation on TV, more adventures were to be had in the pages of TV comic. These comic strips introduced the Doctor's other grandkids, John and Gillian.
What?
Yeah, apparently these two were created to avoid paying for the license to the TV companions, with Polystyle Publications only having the rights to the series title, the TARDIS, and Hartnell's likeness. John and Gillian originally appeared in the 1964 strip The Klepton Parasites, and continued travelling with the second Doctor before being enrolled at university in a 1968 story. Their canonicity is debatable, since there is no clear place for them to slot into the TV series, with the novel Conundrum attempting to retcon them into being constructs in the land of fiction, a pocket universe full of mythical characters introduced in The Mind Robber. Since this is before the Time Lords were introduced, John and Gillian seem to be just normal human children with an eccentric grandfather, similar to how the Doctor and Susan were handled in the Peter Cushing films. I'm not expecting them to come back anytime soon. The Wilderness Years was something of a renaissance for the Doctor's extended family, with the show off the air and the novels from Virgin Publishing left to continue the legacy. 7 years before Jenny, the 2001 novel Father Time gave the Doctor an adopted daughter in the form of Miranda Dawkins. A Time Lord and daughter to an assassinated emperor, she was soon adopted by the 8th Doctor and went on to become the supreme ruler of the universe, just like her biological father, who's apparently a future version of the Doctor. She even had a daughter of her own in Sesame, giving us yet another grandchild. Get lost, John and Gillian. Even the Doctor's marital status is further complicated by the expanded universe, and just to be clear, the Wilderness Years are one of my weak spots as a fan, so I might be getting a few details wrong. Firstly, we have Scarlet, introduced in the 2001 novel The Adventures of Henrietta Street. This 18th century woman married the 8th Doctor, initially to symbolically bind himself to Earth, but the two soon fell in love. This was not to last, however, with Scarlet eventually faking her death, believing the Doctor's love for her would tie him to Earth instead of going to places that needed him. Damn, given this, Rogue and Madame de Pompadour, the Doctor has a hell of a tragic love life. Another of the Doctor's wives was introduced in 1996's Cold Fusion. Known as Patience, get it? Doctor, Patient. She's a fellow Time Lord originally married to Gallifrey's founding father, Omega, who soon became romantically involved with an early version of the Doctor, possibly before the first Doctor and apparently Susan's grandmother? Her backstory was kept vague on screen, and trying to make her fit into the mythology of the Time Lords that's developed in the decades since has led to some confusing revelations. In the novel A Brief History of Time Lords, she's described as being a daughter of the President, and is included in an illustration of the things the Doctor took with him when he left Gallifrey. What? Yep, this is just dropped in the middle of the book, and as far as I can tell, this revelation is exclusive to this one novel. The whole President's daughter story is seemingly extrapolated from throwaway lines in The Magician's Apprentice and Hellbent, which describe the Doctor stealing either the President's wife or daughter at some point.
Since the night he stole the moon and the President's wife.
Was she nice, the President's wife?
It was the President's daughter.
This particular President may have been the Doctor's child or in-law, since the 8th Doctor recalled being from an important political family in the audio series Stranded. The 1997 novel Longbarrow suggests that Susan was adopted, originally being the granddaughter to a legendary Time Lord known as the Other. And since I've mentioned it, let's talk about Longbarrow. Possibly the most infamous text to come out of the Wilderness Years, this behemoth of a novel from writer Mark Platt acts as a conclusion to various plot points from the Virgin New Adventures, and in many ways the entire classic series. Full disclosure, I haven't read it, and not a lot of people have. It's out of print and copies go for hundreds of pounds online, but a PDF version is still available via the Internet Archive, so I had a quick look through and researched some summaries of the plot. Call me lazy, but if I only made this video after finishing the book, it probably wouldn't be out until 2026.
I've been on the same 4 pages for 3 hours.
The novel depicts the 7th Doctor being drawn back to his ancestral home, the House of Longbarrow, a living house on Gallifrey buried 600 years earlier. It was one of many great houses founded to control Gallifrey's population following a curse placed on the Time Lords. Known as Pythia's Curse, this left Gallifreyans unable to conceive, and so to ensure future generations, houses were formed each with a genetic loom. Remember how I said that whether or not the Doctor had parents is a bit unclear? Well, that's because of looms. According to Longbarrow and other books from the Virgin Range, Time Lords are not born, but loomed via these devices according to a strict quota, with the Doctor's family consisting of over 40 cousins whose names I won't even attempt to pronounce. And if that wasn't weird enough, Gallifrey doesn't even have children. Instead, Time Lords, including the Doctor, emerge from the loom as childlike adults. And if that wasn't weird enough, Longbarrow also suggests the Doctor is a genetic reincarnation of the Other, a mysterious figure who founded Time Lord society alongside Rassilon and Omega. And if that wasn't weird enough, 4th Doctor companion Leela has a child with the Time Lord Andrid when Pythia's curse is finally lifted. The Doctor asks them to name the child after him, and although not stated in the book itself, author Mark Platt intended that the child eventually travelled into Gallifrey's distant past and became the Other, who in turn becomes the Doctor, making Leela technically the Doctor's mother, hence he's half human on his mother's side.
What?
Okay, this book is a lot, and exactly what you'd expect from the writer of Ghostlight, which itself was a reworking of Longbarrow. The looms in particular are a controversial subject among fans. They are to Whovians what midi-chlorians are to Star Wars fans, a confusing answer to a mystery they'd rather have just remained a mystery. Along with the Doctor being half human, an idea originating from a writer's bible created during the development of the TV movie, these revelations surrounding the Doctor's heritage were all ignored when the series returned. Stephen Moffat, who oversaw several episodes depicting Gallifreyan children, including the Doctor, explained to Doctor Who magazine that he assumes Time Lords reproduce like humans do, viewing the Virgin books as a separate but equally valid continuity. And while the Timeless Children shared some elements with the story of the Other, Chris Chibnall admitted he hasn't read Longbarrow, probably because it goes for this much on eBay. Looms are certainly interesting, but I find it all a bit complicated and grim, to be honest. As I start rounding out this section, I'll briefly mention what became of the Metacrisis Doctor. The short story The Turning of the Tide and the comic Empire of the Wolf both reveal that this human Doctor eventually married Rose and even had a daughter named Mia. I'm sure the fanfiction writers were very happy. If we go with Who-Ology's interpretation that the Metacrisis was a sort of brother to the Doctor, Mia would I guess be his niece, which would also mean the Doctor spent a solid few years being in love with his sister-in-law? Okay, maybe this wasn't a good way of looking at it. Irving Braxiatel, making his first full appearance in the novel Theatre of War, is effectively the Mycroft to the Doctor's Sherlock. He's their posh, sophisticated older brother, and the elusive owner of the Braxiatel collection of fascinating artifacts and technology. To build this collection, he liaises with multiple versions of himself from across his timeline, breaking several laws of time in the process. Braxiatel, or Brax as he's sometimes called, appears to be based on a throwaway line in 1979's City of Death.
One of the greatest art galleries in the whole galaxy.
Nonsense. What about the Academia Stellaris on Sirius 5? Or the Braxiatel collection?
No.
But has since developed into a popular supporting character in stories with Bernice Summerfield, eventually transitioning into the audio realm in Big Finish's Gallifrey series, where he's voiced by Miles Richardson. As with most Expanded Universe characters, his history is incredibly complicated, with his signature move being manipulating the personal timelines of others to suit his own needs. He even has a daughter in the form of Maggie Matsumoto, making the Doctor an uncle. Although the mythology surrounding looms suggests the Doctor and Brax didn't have biological parents, some novels suggest they still had a functional father in the form of Ulysses. Much like the whole half-human thing, Ulysses originates from the development of the TV movie, with early scripts describing him as a great explorer from Gallifrey's past, and father to the Doctor and the Master.
The Master? My brother?
Yeah, at several points in the show's history there have been attempts to make the Doctor and the Master brothers, from a throwaway line in Planet of Fire to the original plan for John Pertwee's final serial, but as far as the show itself is concerned, they are not related.
Thought you were going to say he was your secret brother or something.
You've been watching too much TV.
So after all that, it seems the Doctor has a huge family, adopted parents, possibly some human heritage, and marriages that stretch throughout history and even into other universes. This leads us to the final question: what happened to them all? The mystery of the Doctor's family dates right back to the beginning of the series, and Stephen Moffat considers it the only mystery the show should never answer, other than the Doctor's name, obviously.
We don't do the story of why he left in the first place and what happened to everybody else.
My answer: they're probably all dead. I know that's depressing, but it does seem to be the case, although not for the reason you probably think. See, the last Great Time War was believed to have wiped out all Time Lords, and the Master's genocide in Series 12 presumably killed any that were left. At least that's what the Doctor believes. However, their family being dead or estranged had its basis in the series long before the Time War was introduced. They are first mentioned in 1967's The Tomb of the Cybermen, where the Doctor admits he can only remember them when he really wants to.
You probably can't remember your family.
Oh yes, I can when I want to. And that's the point, really. I have to really want to bring them back in front of my eyes. The rest of the time, they sleep in my mind.
2 decades later, in The Curse of Fenric, he claims to just not know if he has any family.
Do you have any family yourself?
I don't know.
Must be terrible not knowing.
Yes.
And aside from parents and an uncle, the Doctor's relatives are never referred to in the classic series. He literally never talks about them. There's a reason Kate was so shocked when 15 mentioned Susan. There must be a reason he never brings them up. Regret, maybe? Or perhaps he genuinely doesn't know where they are. If I had to guess what happened before the first Doctor left Gallifrey, I'd say there was some sort of tragedy that cut him off from his family. He's often said he's been running his whole life. Maybe from the family he abandoned? Long Barrow seems to roll with the idea that he's ashamed of his origins, and we know he left home because he was bored of it, so maybe this family drama had something to do with it all. But we've seen with Brax and Jenny that running away for adventure seems to run in the family, so maybe they all did the same thing. Flying out into the stars and doing the opposite of what Time Lords do. Interfere, explore, help others. It's a nice idea, but there's pretty damning evidence that the Doctor's family is lost to time. Although he doesn't explicitly link their deaths to the Time War, the 9th Doctor seemed pretty certain they were all gone in Father's Day.
My entire planet died. My whole family. Do you think it never occurred to me to go back and save them?
The 10th Doctor suggested he lost his children a long time ago, and even after learning that Gallifrey survived, the 13th Doctor claimed she had no family left in The Woman Who Fell to Earth.
Have you got family? No. Lost them a long time ago.
Even our current Doctor, while slowly coming to terms with being adopted, believes his family to be gone.
What about you?
I've got no one.
But let's tackle them all individually. The Meta-Crisis Doctor is happily settled in Pete's world with Rose, and if the expanded universe is to be believed, Jenny is still having adventures and running into Doctors past and future, including her real-life father, 5th Doctor Peter Davison. To the best of my knowledge, Irving Braxiatel's fate after Gallifrey's Time War box sets is left open-ended, although the Doctor believes he perished in the war if we assume he's the same brother described in Smith and Jones. Clara described all 4 of the Doctor's spouses, including River Song, as deceased, and similarly his children and grandchildren as missing, presumed dead.
My children and grandchildren are missing and I assume dead.
This brings us back to Susan Foreman. Her fate has been in question since at least the start of the revived series, with Carol Ann Ford's one reprisal of the role in The 5 Doctors not even addressing what she's been up to since the Dalek invasion. Big Finish is another of my weak spots, but I'm aware that a reunion for Susan and her grandfather eventually took place in the story An Earthly Child. It's revealed she happily settled down with David, who had since passed away after having a child, Alex, giving the Doctor a great-grandson played by Paul McGann's real-life son, Sonny McGann. Isn't that cute? Various short stories and audio dramas have chronicled Susan's later life, with her even meeting the 13th Doctor in a charity anthology. While Big Finish is starting to explore Susan's role in the Time War in a series of new box sets, her current status is still unknown. This conversation in The Empty Child heavily implies she was a victim of the conflict.
Before this war began, I was a father and a grandfather. Now I'm neither, but I'm still a doctor.
Yeah. know the feeling.
The 15th Doctor speculated that she was a victim of the Time Lord genocide, although it's unclear if he's referring to the Time War or the Master's destruction of Gallifrey.
Time Lords were murdered. Genocide rolled across time and space like a great big cellular explosion. Maybe it killed her too.
It looked like we might finally get that long-awaited reunion in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, but it turned out to be a red herring. Or did it? Russell T Davies previously teased that the story of Ruby and the Doctor's family would be connected, and the conversation with Kate about checking in on Susan feels like too much of a loaded Chekhov's gun not to pay off. She was the show's first companion and seemingly the only family the Doctor had after his exile. Plus, he literally promised to come back. She seems like an ideal character to return to the show, even if you have to retcon all the expanded universe stuff to do it. Carol Ann Ford is the last living member of the original TARDIS team, so it would be extremely moving to see her reunite with her grandfather one last time. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get that story, but let's not speculate. The Doctor's original family may be long gone, but they say that friends are the family you choose, and in that respect his family is alive and well. Sarah Jane once told him he had the biggest family on Earth. The 13th Doctor called her friends her fam, and the Doctor is often presented as a parental figure to their companions. Doctor Who is arguably a show all about chosen family, and so, as the Doctor concluded in The Timeless Children, it doesn't matter who they were or where they're from, only who they are right now. And that's all we know about the Doctor's family. I did quite a bit of research for this, but let me know if I missed anything or got any facts wrong. Hope you enjoyed this video and the current season, and I'll see you when I see you.